stands in front of the podium, and she's really a tiny woman. And so they were lowering the podium, and she starts yelling, "My hand! My hand!" And we're like, and they don't understand, and they keep lowering, and her hand is being crushed. But I digress. Do you ever get together? We do this all the time on double dates and talk about weird church stories. It's just wildly entertaining. I have a really good new one, but it's not for this audience. All right. So if we don't hoard, it will kill our marriages. So we're going to learn today about some ideas and things that you can do to spice it up a bit. I'm going to try to be super practical because I like that. We're going to talk about some principles that apply to marriage, and hopefully, even if you've been married 101 years like we have, hopefully that you will be able to pick up and glean something, because marriage is an eternal relationship, so yeah, we're in it for the long haul. So let's go on to the top 10 clues that you are a boring spouse. If none of these apply, you can be excused. The guy's like, please, come on. Number 10, the last treat you bought your spouse was a big roll of garbage bags. You romantic devil. Number 9, you don't have any friends unless you count your visiting teacher or the guy in the cubicle next to you. Number 8, your bathing suit is at least a decade old and the elastic is shot. Own it. Number 7, you tell your spouse you love them once a year on New Year's Eve, just out of pure habit. Number 6, your idea of a good time is to watch TV. Wow, you are exciting. Your idea of a fun date with your spouse is to cruise the aisles at Walmart. Now, I gotta own that one. We love Walmart. When you're on a first name basis with all the cashiers, it's not a good sign. Number 4, you quit flirting because by gum, y'all got your partner. Number 3, the last time you went on a date with your spouse was in the last decade. Not a good sign. And number 2, the last time you went on an overnight with just you and your spouse was to attend a funeral. Those don't count. And number 1, the only reason you're sitting in this lecture is because your spouse dragged you in. You're like, yeah, okay. All right, then, if you fail any of those, this one's for you. We're going to talk first about some marital rules. And I don't know about you, but when I got married, they did not give me a manual. Man, I buy an electric toothbrush and they give me a manual, right? I didn't get a single manual. No warnings, no instructions, nothing. Isn't that weird? Most important thing in the world, they just go, good luck with that. And I'll never forget walking out of the temple and thinking, oh my word, I'm married. Oh, what do I do now? So I'm going to share with you some of the rules that have applied that were in the manual in the sealed portion that you did not receive, all right? Number 1, thou shalt have no other gods before your spouse. Okay, that's a little psycho. What does that mean? That means that you are not to have any intimate partners, and I'm not talking sexual, any other intimate partners other than your spouse. Not your mom, not your dad, not your best friend, no other priorities than your spouse. Even the kids. Even the kids. We're going to talk about that a little bit further. So we're going to place our spouse just under the other gods, Heavenly Father, Jesus Christ, spouse, right up there. Okay? President Kimball taught in Oneness on Marriage, and I know this because it was 1976, I was a freshman at BYU, and I was sitting in the front row. I spent the night in the sleeping bag on the lawn just to be there. And he taught, this means just as completely that thou shalt love thy husband with all thy heart, and shalt cleave unto him and none else. Frequently people continue to cleave unto their mothers, and their fathers, and their chums. All intimacies should be kept in great secrecy and privacy from others. To cleave does not mean to merely occupy the same home. It means to adhere closely and to stick together. Many years ago, my dad received that phone call at work that I'm sure many of you brethren have received. Come home now if you want the kids to live. You ever done that? In fact, my son was just sharing with his friend his memories of finding me sitting in the van in the garage. I had 4 sons. Hello. It's the only place I got privacy. They tried to unlock it and say, that nothing came before that, not even the children. And can you imagine what a wonderful solid base of love and foundation of love that gave them, knowing that that solid love was there. John Roseman is one of my favorite parenting authors, and he teaches, the marriage precedes the children and was meant to succeed them. In the 1970s, we accepted into our vernacular the phrase child-centered family. Not realizing that when a child is the center of his parents' attention, their relationship is in jeopardy. Sometimes we switch our mental and our emotional allegiance to our children. And who can help it? Those babies are born and they hand them to you and the babies are just beautiful. And all they do is just move and move. And so for a short period of time until they learn to talk, they're wonderful. And so you just feel this gush of love and you start to switch that way. Let's take a quiz, shall we? Let's see whether or not you are married to your spouse or to the children. Ready? Oh. Number 1, do your children stay up past 9 or 9:30 in the main family area of the home? Do your children stay up past 9 or 9:30 in the main area? John Roseman taught the importance of putting a child to bed is so daddies and mommies can become husbands and wives again. Bedtime is an exercise in separating the child from the marriage. Now I gotta admit, when my kids were getting older, they wanted to stay up a little later in the family room. They said, wait, I want to watch a show, I want to go to my bedroom, whatever. And so I just came up with a surefire cure. I would just say, I'm warning you, at 9 o'clock, I'm going to turn into a wife. You might want to leave the room. And my boys would freak. They'd all go racing out. Worked every time. Clean the room every time. You may use that if you need to. We need time in our day when we are husbands and wives. And past about 9:30 or 10, I turn into Jell-O. And your interactions at those late hours aren't quite as quality. So we need to separate our children from the marriage. Does that make sense? Okay. Number 2, do you go out with your spouse and without the children at least 3 times a month? When you go out with the children, that's called a family outing. That's not called a date. Does not count. Even babies. I watch couples come into restaurants and they have the baby, and guess where mom's focused the entire date night? On the baby. That's not a date. Doesn't count. Unless they're about a week old, then you can take them. Number 3, excuse me. Have you gone on an overnight without the children and with your spouse, hopefully, within the last year? Have you gone out on an overnight within the last year? These are tough questions. Some of you are kind of squirming over there. Number 4, compare the last time you bought your kids a treat versus buying your spouse a treat. And then number 5, analyze the conversation with your spouse when it's just the 2 of you. Do you spend more than 50% of your time talking about the children? So that's a good snapshot of whether you're married to your spouse or to your kids. And sometimes looking at those and asking those questions is a little bit painful, I know. But I want you to ask this powerful and important question. How much time in the week are you a spouse? And only a spouse. How much time in the week are you a spouse? Why do I pick on this? Because I'm an estate planning attorney, and I see lots of families that crack up. The marriages crack up when the children leave because they have nothing left to bind their interactions. They were married to their children, and once the children left, the marriage is no longer viable. So it's really critically important that we ask ourselves this question. Have we placed our spouse first? Very important question. We give ourselves to our spouses, and we don't do this to anyone else. All right, rule number 2. Thou shalt not have any graven images before your spouse. Are you catching on to this theme here? We get this, okay? Vaguely familiar? What do I mean by a graven image? Do not put money, your job, your stuff, your status, reflected in the sweet love that was illustrated in the other picture. And that message conveyed one message. That picture conveyed one message. I choose you. I choose you over the world. I choose you over stuff. I choose you. Now I want you to turn to your spouse. If your spouse is here, if you're not, if your spouse is in heaven, send it up. Turn to your spouse and say, I choose you. All right. Didn't that feel good? Now, I remember several years ago, I was at my friend's house. And my friend worked for a multi-level marketing company that will remain nameless. And then she lived in a very, very humble, tiny little home. And I remember going over to the refrigerator, and on the refrigerator was a picture of a mansion. And I said to her, yo, what's up with the mansion? See, when I'm in California, when I'm in Utah, I tell them that's how Californians talk. Yo, what's up? And she said, oh, that's the house I deserve. And I remember thinking, that's what they do. They teach you to pick out your goals and aim high, right? And have those goals in front of you. But I could not help but think of her husband. Every time he opened the stinking refrigerator, he thought, I'm a loser. I'm not providing well enough for my wife. My wife feels she deserves this, and I haven't given it to her. I'm lousy. It was no surprise to me that years later they had marital difficulty, and their marriage barely survived. We've got to stop choosing stuff over our spouses. I contrast that with my niece. Her husband said to her, he was in management at Walmart, and he said, I'm tired of it. I've been there 20 years. I want to do something else. I want to go back and finish my degree. And she said, you got it. She sold the house. They lived in a very nice home. She sold all their expensive furniture. She sold their car and got 2 little part-time jobs and completely supported him as they downsized to an apartment so he could go back to school and finish his schooling. And I thought to myself, there are not too many spouses who would have done that. Not too many spouses would have sacrificed all the worldly accoutrement, which is French for stuff, and choose their spouse. We give our spouses a great gift by being content. I've been to Africa, and let me tell you, we all live in opulence. I look at my house and I think an entire village could live here. And I look at my closet and I think I could dress everybody 3 times over. We live in opulence. So can we convey to our spouses that we have enough? That we are content? That these worldly things no longer own us in our marriage? Number 3, do not take their name in vain. Thou shalt not take their name in vain. What do I mean by that? When I'd been married about 3 or 4 years, I was out with my girlfriends. And I was doing what all women do when they're together. What do? They bash their husbands, of course. Right? They gripe and they complain because they figure it's a safe environment. I know the husbands are going, do you do that? Like, what? And so when we did this, and I, of course, was participating in the sport. that your name is safe, that I will be your biggest cheerleader, that I will fight for you and defend you and protect you. Can we give that to each other? Powerful, powerful lesson. President Hinckley taught, I lift a warning voice to our people. We have moved too far toward the mainstream of society in this matter. He said, of course, there's good families everywhere, but there are too many who are in trouble. This is a malady with a cure. The prescription is simple and wonderfully effective. It is love. It is plain, simple, everyday love and respect. I think those two go hand in hand. It is a tender plant that needs nurturing, but it's worth all the effort we can put into it. And so by trusting our spouses and by protecting our spouses vigilantly, by putting them first in our lives, by having nothing before them, and by protecting their name, we are letting that tender plant of love grow. Sometimes we step on it accidentally or we bruise it, but it can flourish once again in our marriages. The next marital rule, my favorite, thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not kill what worked at the beginning. That's a little bit safer. So what worked at the beginning of your marriage that would cause you to fall in love? What was it? What was it that caused you to just say, this is it? She's the best thing. He's the best thing. What was it that you did together? First of all, let's go through a few of them. First of all, you looked good. A lot. she said, boy, Merrilee, we're kind of having marital difficulty. I was like, what? I thought they had a great marriage. And she said, our marriage is just kind of boring. And I said, hey. I said, what did you enjoy doing when you were dating and courting? And she said, well, we loved ballroom dance. They met at a ballroom dance. And they loved to go ballroom dancing together at BYU. I said, when was the last time you went ballroom dancing? She said, at our wedding. I said, aha. Find a place to go ballroom dancing. So they lived in Texas, and they found that the VFW hall on the weekends would play the old big band music. And so she and her husband would go on their date night, and they would dance. It did not take very long for the spark to come back. My parents in my home set a wonderful example. When my parents retired, my dad would come in the morning, and he would say to my mom in the kitchen, have I told you lately that I loved you? She said, well, I know you haven't. And he said, I do. You are so beautiful. And he would sweep her in his arms, and he would hum the big band music in her ear, and dance around the kitchen every morning. Why do those things work? Because when you dance, when you go rock climbing, when you go to Star Trek conventions together, it brings back the little pitter-pat in your heart. It brings back, and your heart just floods with memories of love, does it not? So what were the things that you did together? You also complimented each other quite a bit, right guys? You had to. In order to get her, you had to say stuff like, dang, you're cute. And all those guys, right guys? When was the last time you looked at your wife with puppy dog eyes and said, you're so pretty? Trust me, she's dying to hear that she's beautiful. She's starving to hear that from you. And ladies, guess what? He's hungry too. What if you started every morning and you said, here, okay, I'll give you the easy one. Husband, you turn to your wife and you say, have you lost weight? Works every time. Trust me, she's going to be on cloud nine. She's going to actually cook dinner. It's going to be good. And ladies, what if you turned to your husband and you said, have you been working out? Oh my word. Be still. My beating heart. Imagine the guy that is told in the morning, dude, you are a stud. He's going, he's laughing, he's going to work. I'm a stud. That's right. What you learn. I'm a stud. And he may laugh, but he still feels good. What if you told your wife, you're a princess, you're my princess. Oh my gosh. She could live a month off of that. We are starving, so can we feed each other a little bit? All right, I want you to turn to your spouse and compliment them. Go for it.
That was a compliment.
Oh, look at the smiles. That's good. All right, one of the other things that we did, it feels good. Rinse and repeat, eh? One of the other things that we did when we were courting was we flirted. Now, when we get married, sometimes we forget to flirt. We forget how to flirt. complacency, where you're just in a parallel marriage and you're denigrated into buddies. I want to share with you a story that a psychiatrist wrote about Megan and Matt. And they showed up at the marriage therapist, and he said theirs had been almost a storybook wedding. Matt was a returned missionary, and Megan was his faithful sweetheart who waited. They had gotten married in the temple 11 years earlier. What had gone wrong? They'd been taught to do all the important things, to marry a righteous person in the right place by the right authority, and to keep that covenant. Yet here they were, disappointed, trying to figure out what had happened to their marriage. Like many others, they described their marriage relationship as contradictory and confusing. They don't fight, they don't quarrel, they don't criticize or demean, they don't ignore one another, they sincerely love each other. Yet they are bored and dissatisfied with their relationship. They don't seem to have the fun that they did in the early years of their marriage when they were courting. This type of devitalized relationship is called a parallel marriage. Just as parallel lines run in the same plane but never meet, Matt and Megan lived in the same home without closeness. They were like walking down a railroad track, never touching each other, never meeting. They seldom discussed their feelings about each other. It has been suggested that more marriages die of neglect than of sin. Let me repeat that. More marriages die of neglect than of sin. Neglect of each other in the marriage relationship seems to be the primary problem. It said there are many people, and he quotes President Kimball, who said there are many people that weaken their relationship. There are spouses who are in the low state of mere joint occupancy of the home. They would do well to reevaluate, to renew their courting, to express their affection, to acknowledge kindness, and to increase their consideration. And then President Kimball promises, so their marriage can again become beautiful, sweet, and growing. So many people allow their marriages to become stale and grow cold, he said, like old bread, worn-out jokes, or cold gravy. So we're going to talk about the number one key to spicing up your marriage. The number one key to prevent this from happening. And that is date night. Date night is the key to having a vital marriage relationship. I was raised with parents that taught me this great principle. They faithfully dated every week. And I watched my 3 older sisters. One lived the principle and is still married to this day. The other 2 did not live this principle. One's been through 4 husbands, the other one's on her 3rd. And so I've seen in my life those who have lived this principle and those who have not. We had friends, she liked musicals and concerts, and he liked sports. I mean like rabid fan type sports guy. And movies. So she went to musicals and concerts with her friends. He went to sporting events with his friends and to the movies. And he had this one guy from his ward that they would go to the movies together because neither one of their spouses liked the movies. And I remember saying to them, you're dating each other more than you're dating your wives. What does that say? Not a good sign. Then there was another couple. He liked prepping, emergency preparedness stuff, and photography. She liked plays and art. She took CERT training with him and would go anywhere he wanted to take pictures and learn how to scope out the good places. He started going with her to plays and to art museums and they both discovered that they actually liked all those things together. Then there's a third couple. These are good friends of ours as well. They never date. She does family history. He reads books. They barely talk. They're still married, if you could call it that. But it is a parallel marriage, and they're more like roommates than spouses. We have an eternity together. Don't you want to enjoy it? Don't you want to look forward to it? Don't you want to have fun with each other? Date night is the key. So let's go through, because I can see that some of you are having excuses cropping up. I can see it in your face. So we're going to go through the lame excuses that people come up with to avoid dating. Number 1, We are all given exactly the same time. So when you say, I don't have time for that, what you're really saying is, I choose not to do this. I choose not to make this a priority in my life. That's a painful message, isn't it? That's dangerous. So the second one is, he or she won't go. Now, I share this next story with permission from my beloved spouse. We've been married for a while, and for some reason, I don't know why, I was going to law school, and his work was having trouble. Anyway, we kind of fell out of the habit for a few months of going on our regular date night. For some reason, I don't know why. But anyway, I remember thinking, man, I'm bored. I want to go on a date. So I said to my husband, hey, let's go on a date this weekend. We haven't gone on a date in a while, and he kind of mumbled about how busy he was at work, and I said, I'll get a sitter, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. So Friday night comes, I say to my husband, I'm going to go get the sitter. I went and got the sitter. We always had boy babysitters because we had 4 boys. They thought they were playmates. Worked out great. So I go get the babysitter, I bring her on home, and I said, okay, honey, let's go. And Stevie here says, I got a lot of work to do. I don't want to go. And I said, no problem. So I said to the sitter, here's the kid, make sure he stays alive, put him in bed, I'm out of here, bye-bye. And I went out. And I went out to dinner, and I had a big, fat, juicy steak, and I just had a great time. And I came back. And I took the sitter home. I'm sure the sitter was like, what the heck was that? And Stevie said, what'd you do? I said, oh, I had a great time. I went out to dinner, had a big fat juicy steak. It was fabulous. He's like, oh, okay. Next week, I said, okay, date night's coming. I'm going to go get the sitter. I go get the sitter. I come back. Stevie says, I'm tired. I don't want to go. No problem. See ya. I'm sure by now the boy's calling the bishop. Bishop, there's a serious problem with the Boyacks. I think you should check it out. I go out to dinner. I had Chinese. Because then I went and saw this great movie, forget what it was called, The Last Emperor, whatever it was, with the kid. It was great. I had the best time. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm just having a great time. It was great. I go home. My husband says, what'd you do? I said, it was wonderful. Went out to dinner, saw this great movie. Oh my gosh, you would have loved it. It was awesome. It was a really good movie, you know? And that was it. Next week, go and get sitter. Steve says, where should we go? Let's go. And away we went. Sometimes we just need to prime that pump. Sometimes it got a little dry and a little squeaky. And sometimes we just have to be persistent and get it going again. So and you will note, I never criticized him. Never. I strictly invited him to come along and play. So that if I criticize, it's offensive, right? Bad reaction. I just kind of went along. I thought, if he won't date me, I'll date myself. I'm a fabulous conversationalist. Can I just say, this is really nice. Third lame excuse, we don't have money. Lame, 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 lame. Who are among the brokest people you know? College students. And yet they manage to date up a storm. And they're broke. Call your college-age kids. What do you do to date me? I have to tell you, we've been through unemployment, and some of our best dates were during those times. We would go get Frosty at Wendy's. We would go up to the business park and make out in the car. I remember the time the windows were all steamy and we hear this knock, knock, knock on the window, and we were just kissing. And we rolled down the window, and the cop looked at us and went, oh, you're old. Which I did not think was very kind at all. He said, yes, we are. Watch and learn. Some of our best dates are just to go on a walk. You live by the beach or recently close. Go for a walk on the beach. In your bare feet. It's wonderfully romantic. Go drive up to a hill. Watch the sunset. Look into each other's eyes and say silly, mushy things. It's free. And you can trade babysitting so it doesn't cost you a dime. So I off with your spouse into the sunset. Remember that? And that deserves 3 hours a week. We consider Friday night to be sacred in our marriage. It is sacred. We've had to rearrange word activities. That's date night. It's sacred. You can do anything you want on Saturday, but Friday night is sacred. Now, occasionally you have to adjust. But once a week, sacred 3-hour block given to our marriage. And those of you that are just cheapskates, think about this one. Date night is cheaper than therapy or divorce. Okay? Right? Way cheaper. Super. Way cheaper. At Frosty, way cheaper than a session, I'm just telling you. It's the number one thing you can do to improve your marriage. Absolutely number one. Well, okay. Focus on the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. That's number one. But a very close number two is to have a regular date night. It is preventative medicine. It does have one rule, and that is when you're out on that date, no more than half that conversation can be about the kids. I mean, not that discussing potty training isn't the most romantic thing on the planet. But we're going to kind of keep that to 50%, shall we? Now let's talk about some great date ideas. You can look these up. Be careful when you do. Put in the word LDS or Christian, or you might get more than you asked for on Google. Go get an ice cream cone. Okay? If you're lactose intolerant, go get fries. And go on a nice drive. Go do service. Have you ever thought about doing that? I'll tell you one of the sweetest things you can do. Go to a rest home. What do they call it now? Skilled nursing facility. And go around and go visit with the elderly there and ask them to tell you about the first time they fell in love. Oh my gosh. Sweet and precious. You can go to the local shelter, to the food bank, wherever, and do some service together. You'll feel great about yourselves when you're done. Go on an arts date night. Go to the museum. Go to a play. Go to a concert. If you're broke, go to the high school. If you're super, super cheap and broke, go to the elementary school. You'll be at the concert. Who are you here for? Nobody, man. We can love this stuff. Move in your dates. Hike, bike, swing, dance, walk. And if you're severely elderly, watch videos. Look at them go up that mountain, Bertha. It's a beautiful thing. And you live in a great area. Go online, go to TripAdvisor. What are the top 10 things to do in Laguna Niguel? What are the top 10 things to do? Figure it out. Go be a tourist. We went to La Brea Tar Pits today. Why? Because he had never been, and I hadn't been since we were a kid. We do weird stuff like that, okay? Do touristy stuff. Do a restaurant tour. Eat a different course in each one. You can go to McDonald's for a little appetizer, a little wrap. Right? And you can go over to Chili's, have a steak, and then you can go over and have a ice cream cone, have a Neapolitan shake at In-N-Out Burger. Knock yourselves out. Go on a random dice drive. This is when you get in the car and you roll the dice. Even, right, odd, left. I'm not sure what straight is, can't remember. All right, go to a picnic in the park. Go do sports. Attend a local baseball team, girls volleyball or t-ball. T-ball is super fun. My grandson's playing t-ball, and he is the biggest nerd on the planet, okay? The guy is like geek personified. And I said, I'm so surprised that he enjoys this sport. And my daughter-in-law said, watch him. He's doing Star Wars. And sure enough, he's up and he's doing whoa, 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 whoa with the bat. And I'm like, and then he's like striding like he's a stormtrooper. I'm like, that's my kind of kid playing t-ball. All right? You can go on a double date. Double dates are really great. You know what my favorite part about a double date is? When we come home and I turn to my husband and say, oh man, I'm so glad I'm married to you. Works every time. You're like, he's a super nice guy, but he gets, I'm just really glad I'm married to you. Go have a game night. Play games. We love all kinds of games. Go do a dollar store spurge. Each of you take $5, go to the dollar store and buy treats for each other. Oh, really fun. And then go to the temple. Go to the temple. My sister is not a member member of the church, and so we were in Hawaii, a bunch of the family, and so we were going in to do a session, and she was out in the car waiting for us. And after we came out, she said, I don't know what you do in there, but every single couple has come out of there holding hands and smiling at each other. So if you want to build love, go to the temple. The couple that plays together stays together. The couple that plays together stays together. The reverse is also true. The couple that does not play together does not stay together. Or if they do, they are bored out of their gourd. So let's talk about things that we can do to bring play back into our marriage beyond just date night. I want you to think about 3 things you do together as a married couple. My husband and I dearly love Star Trek. May the Force be with you. We love Tom Clancy books. We love camping. We love eating. It's one of my gifts. What 3 things do you enjoy doing together? I want you to think about that. Breathing does not count. Next, what did you do when you were courting? Did you go rock climbing? Did you read history books together? Did you go listen to weird poetry recitations? Did you go to the comedy club? Did you snowboard? Did you snorkel? Were you rock hounds or history buffs or enjoy traveling? What did you do when you were courting that bound you together? And do you do something together that's physical? I think that's an important element that sometimes we neglect. We had, a couple neighborhoods ago, we had an elderly couple that lived in the neighborhood, and they would go out in the evening after dinner and hold hands and walk up the street and down the street. And I thought, what a lovely, lovely thing. They were out, breathing the fresh air, holding hands, doing something physical. Maybe you enjoy bike riding. Maybe you enjoy surfing. We go to the ocean together, I snorkel, and he dives beneath me. It's great. He always said, oh, it's like being in an aquarium. Don't you want to learn how to dive? I said, then you know. It was never on my bucket list. Go in an aquarium. No. So what physical things are you doing together? What interests do you share? What interests do you share? Do you love opera, like my friend? Do you love politics, like my other friend? Do you love doing, my sister loves to go to diners, weird little diners. And so every time they travel, they go to weird little diners. I mean, whatever your floats your boat. What interests do you share together that have nothing to do with the children or can be done without the children? For example, you may be avid skiers and you can carry that out without the children. Does that make sense? It's something that you can also do together. When you're retired, what will you talk about? We have, in my practice, I have this happen where they retire, and in fact, I just had a woman confiding in me, and she said, retirement's been really, really hard. It's been really hard. What are you going to talk about? And you're retired for a long time, like 30 to 40 years. You're retired. And if you can't handle and have a robust, intimate relationship when you're retired, what makes you think you're going to want to have an eternity together, right? So we've got to develop those conversations all over again and have you establish connections that are just for you. Meaningful little stories that you share, little things that you share in common. Next, we're going to take responsibility for your own fun. What do I mean by this? When we've been married about 3 or 4 years, we kind of hit a rough patch. It was a little boring. What was I doing? I was working part-time. Steve was having a little bit of struggle with the company he was with. so I was driving home. I remember this so clearly. We lived in San Jose, and I was driving home from that, and I thought, what do I want to do the most? And I thought, I want to finish law school. So I immediately began the process to go back to law school part-time and finish. And once I started taking care of myself, I was a much better wife. Instead of glomming on and expecting him to just do everything. And sometimes married couples do that, right? When they're newly married, they just glom on to each other. And that gets tiring really fast. So we're going to take care of ourselves. One of the things I love to do, you can see this woman in the class. I love going to these kinds of things. And I live, eat, breathe this stuff. You put me in Education Week, I am like one happy clam, sun up to sundown. This is like root canal surgery for Steve. He hates it. The only reason he's here is because I'm talking. What does he like to do? Hit the open road, baby. He wants to go on a ride on his motorcycle. And so we've learned that I say I'm going to another seminar. It's so great. And he's like, that's wonderful, honey, go for it. And he'll say, I'm going to go on a ride. And I say, go for it. Each of us needs to take care of having healthy interests of our own, so that we bring into the marriage a healthy balance of diversity of interests within the marriage. Some things we'll share. I hope a lot of things we'll share. But some things we'll enjoy doing on our own. And so instead of making your spouse feel guilty, we can say, go for it. That's so wonderful. Have a marvelous time. He used to go on dive trips, and every one of the husbands would say, my wife's going to really make me pay for this one. And he goes, really? My wife practically threw me out the door and said, have a good time. Why? Because I know that he would come home refreshed, excited, and grateful for my support. And every year when I wanted to go to Education Week, he would stay home with the 4 little boys down in Southern California and put me on the plane and begin to pray that I would return. Always supportive, never once complained. The other thing we can do is to go on a honeymoon again. I remember I was at Rotary years ago, and one of the gentlemen stood up and shared and said, I'm going on a cruise with my wife. It's the first time in 30 years that we will have been away together. I just want to stand up and scream. Are you insane? You've been starving your marriage for 30 years? So I want to encourage you to do a honeymoon again. Go on an overnight once a year. There's things called Airbnb, super cheap. In fact, one of the most clever ones I heard about was there was a grandma in one family that was very committed to her children being able to have time away. And she knew that they didn't have the money. So she would go stay in their home for the weekend and babysit their children. And then she would let them go and hang out in her house. And she would stock it with fun food that they could have so that they could have the privacy of a weekend away. It cost nothing. How cool is that? So sometimes we can be a little bit creative, but I hope you'll think about investing this in your marriage. And then we need to be a fun-living spouse. A fun-living spouse. I put some pictures here to remind us. Sisters, we buy treats for our kids all the time and our grandkids all the time. Do we treat our husbands? And this is the universal treat. A Snickers bar. You give them a my husband likes are balloons. So for like Valentine's Day, I'll get him one of those balloons at the dollar store, right? I think he likes it because every day he goes, look, it's still up there. Look at that. The last one lasted 2 months. It was like a miracle. Think of how many points I got for a stinking $1. I got 60 days of points off of that puppy. It was a good investment. So what cute little things can you give to your spouse? And please be random. Not just, I do it on Valentine's Day and Mother's Day and on our birthday. Those are great and they're important and don't miss them or you're dead meat. But spice it up a little bit. You know? Monday's a great day. Monday's a wonderful day. What connections do you have as a married couple? This story was told by Hubie Brown's daughter. She says, up until Mother's stroke, they'd go through a ritual daily. Daddy would get up from the breakfast table, which was set very nicely with a pretty cloth, matching napkins, and flowers. Whoa. He'd kiss her goodbye and they'd walk to the front porch together. Daddy would go down 3 steps and then turn and ask, did I kiss you goodbye? Mother would answer, why, no, you didn't. Daddy would kiss her again. As he walked to the car, Mother would run into the dining room where she would blow kisses to him from the window. While Daddy was backing the car out of the drive, Mother would run back to the porch where she'd wave her handkerchief at him. Just before the car turned the corner, Daddy would blink on the brake lights 3 times for I love you. Can you imagine? What an amazing ritual of love they developed. Imagine what that taught their children and their grandchildren. I'm sure their great-grandkids were going, ew, they're 85, look, they're still wearing that stupid handkerchief. And inside they were going, oh, what a loving, sweet thing. What a loving, sweet thing. Now, I'm going to share with you 2 more principles that I think are pivotal to a marriage. But you've been sitting, everybody stretch, reach up. Come on, up, 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 up. Hug your spouse. Hug the complete stranger next to you. Stretch, come on, stretch it out. There you go. All right. Got your brain going. 2 more principles and then your marriage is going to be totally perfect, okay? First one, complimentary gifts. After I'd been married about 20 years, we were on a drive up to Julian. It's a little town up in the mountains. We were going to church there. And we're driving up there. We're just sitting there. And the Spirit said to me very clearly, Merrilee, do you spiritually trust your husband? And I answered as I always do to the Spirit. Huh? It was so random. And the Spirit said again, do you spiritually trust your husband? I thought, well, that's an odd question. And then I immediately thought of a woman that I knew. She was an elderly woman, and her entire life she was an amazing scriptorian. She knew her scriptures forwards and backwards. And she believed that in order to be a celestial person, you had to know your scriptures. And her husband did not. He wasn't into it all that much. He loved him, but he didn't pour over him like she did. He was very charitable. And so through their entire marriage, she would beat him over the head with the fact that he was not a scriptorian like she was. And that he'd better start studying his scriptures. And she would even go so far as to say, and if you don't, I'm going to be reassigned in the next life to another husband. Who says stuff like that? But no lie, she did. And then I had a horrifying realization. I realized that for 20 years I had been doing exactly the same thing. One of the things that I'm very good at spiritually is obedience. Mainly because I had 3 older sisters, 2 of whom were train wrecks. And I saw what happened when you were disobedient. So let me tell you, I was obedient. It came very easily to me, and I thought that's the way you were supposed to be righteous. And then I married my husband, and he was obedient as well. After he'd asked a few questions, pondered in his fun, our entire marriage. So then the Spirit said, what gifts does your husband have? And I thought, oh, geez. He has the patience of Job, obviously, to be married to me. He's so patient. He's so kind. He's rarely critical of other people. He has tremendous integrity and honesty. He's humble. He just has this wonderful gift of a testimony of Jesus Christ. And I thought about all of those gifts, and then I had a horrifying realization. Every one of my weaknesses lined up one-to-one with his strengths. I've kind of struggled with being critical of others. He never has. I struggled with honesty. I'm a lawyer, for heaven's sake. And I was in politics. It was a little challenging, okay? So for many years, it was hard. I had problems with humility. I know that will come as a shock to you. And just like one-on-one, my weaknesses were dead on with his strengths. And then I looked at my strengths, and they were one-to-one with his weaknesses. Now you need to understand what's happening at this point. Steve's driving in the car, and I've gotten a little notebook out, and I'm writing down all of this revelation and understanding I'm receiving. And I'm weeping. I was, and I'm just blubbering and writing, and poor Steve's driving going, oh no. Oh no, what have I done now? Oh, she's really upset. This isn't going to be good. Poor guy was stressed out the whole way, and I'm just freaking out. What I learned was we were meant to be one, that together we had all the gifts we needed to return together. Let's read that first line together. Ready? Together let's try that again, people. Waking up. Together we have the gifts needed to return together. Heavenly Father puts us in these marriages and he says, Merrilee, those are your strengths. Would you help Steve? Steve, those are your strengths. Would you help Merrilee? Together we can do it. For 20 years I have been griping and complaining that he did not have my gifts. For 20 years I've been saying, why can't you be more like me? And when I reached this dawning revelation, I realized I should be grateful because I cannot gain exaltation alone. I need his gifts and he needs mine. Together we have the gifts needed to return together. Together. Please stop demanding that they be like you and instead embrace and thank the dear Lord that they complement you. And then finally, the treat as if principle. If you will treat your spouse as if he or she possesses a certain attribute, over time they will begin to act as if they possess that attribute. Eventually that will become who they are. What do I mean by this principle? What do I mean by this? Sisters, what if every morning you looked at your husband and you thought, he is a beloved son of God. I'm going to treat him that way all day. What if you looked at him and thought, he is a patient man. I'm going to treat him that way all day. What if you looked at him and thought, he is a wonderful patriarch in our home. I'm going to treat him that way all day. So when it comes time for family prayer, and I have to say, I violated this one, and so once I learned this principle, I remember it was time for family prayer, and we're all folding our arms, and my husband says, honey, aren't you going to call on somebody? And I said, oh yeah, I screwed up. You're the patriarch of the home, I'm sorry. And waited. And he was a little flustered at first, and was like, looky, and called on someone to say the prayer. And guess who did that from then on? The patriarch. Not the matriarch wannabe. Instead of having family home evening be the Merrilee Boyack Razzle Dazzle Show. you keep treating them as if they're not. If you will relentlessly treat him as if, he will become. The reverse is also true. If you treat your husband as if he is lazy and irresponsible, he will be. How's that working? Brethren, let's talk to you, your turn. What if every morning you looked at your wife and thought, she is a beloved daughter of God, destined to be a queen? How would you treat her all day? Holy cow! Can you imagine? What if you thought, she is a capable woman? All day long you treated her that way. Or she is smart. All day long you treated her that way. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if you behaved that way and treated her that way, who she would become? This principle applies to how the Lord teaches us. When we go to the temple, what does the Lord teach? Or even when we go to church, what does the Lord teach us? You are destined to become queens, kings and queens, gods, goddesses. Prophets and apostles have taught us this over and over and over again. This is your destiny. This is who you really are. Can you imagine? That's the way God teaches us and treats us so that we will fulfill that true destiny. In closing, I want to share with you a little experience I had in Detroit many years ago. They were dedicating the Detroit Temple. And my mother's book, The Michigan Mormons, was being put into the cornerstone. And so we were there for the dedication. I'll never forget it. We're sitting there, and President Hinckley began the dedicatory meeting. And he said, this morning I sat across from my wife, and I held her hands in mine. And they are old and gnarled, but they are the most beautiful hands in the world to me. And then he got really emotional, and his chin began to quiver. Remember how he used to do that? And he said, oh, how I love my wife. I love my wife. And I remember watching that day and thinking, that's what I want. I want that kind of marriage. I want a marriage that age that I am beauty personified to my husband and him to me. I want that kind of marriage that is rich and deep and sweet and soul satisfying. Brothers and sisters, we've learned many things today, some of which we can add to and improve in our marriage, some of which we're doing great. But I hope that through this all, this will begin the conversation between you and your spouse. And that you will ponder these things and talk about them and go on lots of dates and talk about these things. And that perhaps your marriage